Good morning and welcome to the Gateshead College presentation, Action Research for Data and Technology. Our title, Does Topic-Based Formative Assessment to Enable Individualised Learning Improve Learner Outcomes? And your presenters are myself, Marianne Malloy.
And myself, Sans Dobson. The introduction of the Action Research Programme, after several years of using our flipped learning classroom method, allowed us to analyse the use of data and tech as a learning tool prior to a lesson, and whether it has a positive influence or a negative influence on learner outcomes. The question could be, what would you describe as improved outcomes? Grades, attendance, note-taking, or even engagement, etc. The learner arrives at the classroom armed with basic knowledge of the subject and is allowed to apply that knowledge to tasks, allowing the teacher to facilitate the learning at an individual level rather than a tutorial lesson at the front of the class. This led us to our main question for our Action Research and also our sub-questions. Does topic-based formative assessment to enable individualised learning improve learner outcomes? And then our 4 sub-questions.
So how did we carry this out? Well, to start with, we had 481 learners as part of our cohort in this research. That was spread across 7 teachers. We also used information and feedback from our network partners. In order to carry out our research, we ceased using our previous online flipped learning tool for various reasons, but most importantly, we felt that we should start the academic year with a fresh software to help engage all learners, including the returners.
The GCSE Pod, an online video platform, it allows the teachers to set preset videos matching the topic for that week. This allows the students to take notes in a safe environment at their own pace, not having peer assessed or ever being asked questions in a classroom. This can be done by themselves at home, watched and rewatched, and then at the end of each video they would answer online up to about 10 questions. This gives good feedback for the student where they can see where they missed out on certain topics, which then allows them to write down their outcomes for the week. It's also a valuable tool for guiding your lesson planning as a teacher. Prior to the students even coming anywhere near the class, you can see what they're good on the topic and what they're bad on the topic, which would decide exactly what kind of tasks you're going to put down in your lesson.
We were also giving them a progress assessment between, it was either done, depending on the teachers, at the end of lesson 1 as homework between lesson 1 and 2, or at the start of lesson 2. And these were 3 exam style questions, just to kind of recap on the skills or get learners and how to do it within that environment there. In the second lesson of each week, we did a Prove It, which was a summative assessment topic based, standardised across the entire department, so all learners did the same assessment. And the results of this were recorded on our shared tracker. And we also used mock exams in February, in the run-up to February half term. And again, we recorded this and used this information to help learners in their development later in the year. As part of understanding learners' feelings a little bit more and what they understand of individualised learning and their thoughts towards GCSE Pod and the whole flipped learning concept, we did a learner survey with them, and the results of this were quite interesting.
Strong individualised learning. This was demonstrated by confident learners coming into the classroom and being engaged straight away in their own individualised learning. They'd come in with their own outcomes and be able to work towards the end of the lesson by solving these problems, helped along and facilitated by the tutor, who is no longer constrained to the front of the classroom, allowed to work in one-to-one situations or in small groups in the classroom as a facilitator. This pedagogy was identified in classrooms during lesson observations.
And some quotes include, students were given a large amount of individualised support. Students demonstrated strong independent skills working together to solve problems without prompting. In particular, differentiation, meaning that all learners were able to concentrate on developing their individual learning gaps for the imminent exams.
Every second lesson would result in one of our prove-its, as mentioned in the earlier slide, where the students would be able to work towards GCSE standard questions and be given a graded mark at the end of each lesson, placed onto our tracker. The prove-its will be given in different styles, depending on the teacher. Some teachers would help the students. Some students will be allowed to have their notebooks and be able to complete the test one-on-one.
And we can see how this has been reflected in the tracker through these different teacher delivery styles. The colour-coded system that you can see here. So here is an example of a teacher who maybe perhaps led the students more or had allowed them to have their notes more in the classrooms. And this second example, you can see where students may have been given support at the start and then it's been gradually taken away as the year's gone on, and the reds indicate where learners are becoming weaker at the topics. And these are the topics, this is telling the learners that they need to rework on these topics a little bit more, giving them that focus for that individualised process. We decided to do a GCSE pod usage analysis. For this, we took a sample of 127 learners across the 7 teachers, and basically we had one group per teacher. What we did notice was that the highest engagement in GCSE pod also had a highest completion of prove-its, as you can see by these 2 bar charts here. With the prominent areas.
Art Design and Media 2 and Art Design and Media 3 showed a consistent higher downloading of the video streams, which also correlated with the amount of prove-it completions. I suppose further action research would suggest let's delve further into that and see whether it's good results from their prove-its based on how many videos they've watched, or was that just they just completed the prove-its or not?
Yeah, and how it links with perhaps their tracker scores and their mock exam results.
Yeah.
And it becomes a recommendation for later in our report.
This could also be a reflection of a tutor or the actual area itself. Art, design and media are used to using their videos and media work as part of their course. So that could be a reflection of, should that be something more contextualized that's helping that department than others?
So we analysed our mock results. We had 311 learners' results recorded on our team spreadsheet at time of analysis. 65%, which is actually really good. We were unable to get the full amount due to lockdown, and all the results weren't available at that time. As you can see, that 43 learners missed 1 or more exam, which includes 11 learners who missed all 3 exams and were given 0 marks across the board. This left us with 300 students to analyse, and this analysis is shown in 3 bullet points following this. What's particularly interesting from these results, of the 22% of the learners that made no change, 2 missed 1 mock exam. Of the 46% of the learners who decreased 1 or more grade, 30 learners missed 1 or 2 papers, and from 85 out of the 139 learners who decreased by 1 grade. Quite a significant factor here is that if all learners had attended all 3 exams, that percentage for achieving a grade higher would have been potentially a higher percentage. Attendance also decreased around as the mocks progressed through. You can see within paper 1 to paper 3, 11 learners attended less out of that. Various factors due to this. The fact that they might have felt they weren't doing very well in their first couple of papers, they didn't bother coming in for the third. Also, these exams were taking place in the February, which was at the point where learners were starting to self-isolate due to coronavirus, COVID-19 outbreak pandemic. Results from our learner survey. We received a 54% completion from our learners, and we had 8 questions in the survey, which was made up of 3 open questions as highlighted in blue, and the other questions were closed questions. Survey was anonymous, which gave the learners an opportunity to be more honest with their feelings. With question 1, does using GCSE Pod prior to your lesson help you in your maths learning? 88.5% of them felt that GCSE Pod did help them. In question 4, what are the factors that have changed your feelings? You can see here that predominantly the teacher was the biggest response within that, and individual work was the second biggest. With GCSE Pod, although it was not the highest, it was the least positive factor, still 145 learners saw its usage as a positive factor. And although its negative was the highest, only 45 learners saw it as a negative factor. When asked, do you feel you have control of your learning, you can see that the majority of the learners, nearly 3/4 of them, well, over 3/4 of them have some kind of control, either sometimes, all of the time, or never, and nearly half feel they do most of the time. When asked, do you feel that you're on track to meet your target grade, over half have stated yes, and just under a third have said that they don't know, which is quite interesting. Based on how you feel you've performed over the past term, what final grade do you think you will achieve? The majority of learners are quite confident in that they're going to achieve a grade 3 or a grade 4. Looking at the mock results might have some kind of distortion result from there, but it's nice to see that they're confident in that. But also the honesty with some of the learners, 8% thinking that they would get a grade 2, and some learners even thinking they might achieve a grade 1.
I'd also say that the 55% there for your green is the tracking system that we've used for them to see their distance learning from the day they walked into the college to the actual survey. When you're looking at weekly prove-its, their tracking system being done, their mock results being done, they can all see what may be an overinflated version of what they would get in the end. But I would agree with you. I think their confidence to be able to step up now and say, yeah, I think I'm going to get a grade 4 this year, or even the grade 5s, there's still a good effort there. So, yeah.
Moving on to the open questions, there were 3 open questions. Question 2 looked at the reasons they were asked to complete GCSE Pod, and here the keywords that came up was to prepare them, to develop them, to help them as part of their learner journey. In question 3, when asked about how their feelings had changed towards maths since September, the keyword here was confident. 139 responses were categorized as a positive response. Now this included things like they felt more confident, although they still hated maths, they felt that they were getting better, or that they were able to answer more questions. 35 learners were very definitive as a negative response. With question 6, when asked about their awareness of making progress, the key link here was that 226 out of the 253 learners gave a combination of including some or more tracker, prove it, start a task, the notebook questions, and their overall confidence in general. And only 21 of these learners did not know. This could be for any number of reasons. So overall, The survey has told us that the majority of learners valued their individual learning process. That the teacher and individualised learning has had the biggest impact in their learner journey. And by the teacher element, we're meaning that whole teacher-student relationship and giving them that freedom and that autonomy to make that individualised learning more is creating that better student-teacher relationship from when they were at school and treating them a bit more like an adult, I guess. Because of that, learners are feeling more confident, and the learners see the Prove It as a good way to see how they're progressing. They're seeing this weekly in and out throughout the year, and they're motivated a lot more into improving themselves to do better, to be better, and to achieve. What we have found from this is that 3 learners particularly stated their dislike of GCSE Pod and felt that this style of learning did not suit them. And we need to bear this in mind for future years and maybe start looking at alternative methods of flipped learning to accommodate learners like this. And this is something that perhaps becomes part of our recommendations. We've received some really good and interesting feedback from some of our network partners. Derwent's College used GCSE Pod and our notebook, but they didn't use GCSE Pod as in much detail as what we did. They used the videos, and then they got to their learners to complete a mini formative assessment at the start of lesson 1, and they called this a What I Already Know assessment. The outcomes of this assessment determined the work that they would complete in class in that lesson. In the second lesson, they would complete a weekly topic test, similar to our Prove It, but they designed these themselves. They did this whole process with their 16 to 18 learner provision, but they also included their adults. And what they found was that the adults were more engaged and generally performed better weekly in the mini formative assessments as a starter, in their weekly topic tests, and they also performed better in their mocks. One of the other feedback from our other network partner is from New College Durham. They used Socrative and Conquer Maths. Now what they did is they created a pre-topic check using Socrative, and these were a set of 8 to 12 questions. Classes 1 markers tasked at grade 3 or lower. So these are like your key skills for the topic for the week. It started off where they wanted to do it as a pre-lesson topic check. The teacher would then use that to plan the lesson around that, and learners would work on what they needed using Conquer Maths in lesson to support them. Learners liked it, but they did find that as they progressed through the year, learners who didn't do the pre-topic check outside the class started doing it inside the lesson because the lesson couldn't progress without it. Lessons ended with a progress measure assessment. Now this progress measure assessment matched up with the pre-topic test, check. So the questions were very similar. Learners only needed to do the questions that they got wrong in the pre-topic check in the measure assessment to see actually how they've progressed. So they weren't getting them to repeat any questions that they'd already kind of mastered, so to speak. They did notice a strong positive correlation in high class grades and mock exam results.
So in conclusion, the Prove It and the tracker play a key role in the achievement for the students, which is reflective in our mock results at high grades at 32%. I think more analysts, to analyse it a bit more, would be required, as the Prove It and the tracker are delivered by the teacher in different methods. And I think if we take a little bit more time to look at how and which individual teacher works best, I feel that the learners have more confidence in that they're achieving 32% of them achieving high grades only in the September part of the year. But I think it's the teacher and the individual learning which is an important factor. They've highlighted it. That's something that we need to take a little bit more in depth. It's the teacher relationship, where they're not standing at the front anymore and they're now part of the team and helping the students one-to-one. The Prove It's help learners know their progress on a weekly basis, and flipped learning and topic-based formative assessment is significant for learners taking responsibility of their own learning. Overall, the learner outcome is not just what grades they achieved. Their outcomes should be reflective of their behaviour, attendance, engagement, and overall spectrum. As long as you remember that learner outcomes is not just about grades.
So our recommendations for options to scale up. The first would require further analysis of our GCSE pod usage against the mock results and target grades to see if there's any correlation between that, be it positive or negative. If we had learners who had sat their exams, it would have been good to have included the final grade that they get within that correlation process as well.
Well, I think if the learners sat all of their exams, because when some of them, when we looked at our data earlier and they missed 2 or 3 exams, yet they were still included in the figures, I think each student should be made to sit all 3 exams so we can get a proper, true correlation of their figures.
A lot more detail from it.
Links and differences between the 16-18 full-time learners with the adult learners and flipped learning and formative assessment tools. Yeah, I think there is a definite link between the flipped learning process and the more mature you are, where you can see the actual improvement you're making.
Yeah, and that was highlighted within our initial research as part of our introduction in our report.
Yeah.
And another way is how we can use the formative assessment tools more effectively with those less engaged learners. There is no kind of one assessment tool fits all, we get that, but one thing I've noticed between working with the network partners is there are different tools to formatively assess these learners at the start of the lesson or prior to the lesson. We've all used different strategies, and it'd be quite nice to work with them a bit more and see if we could develop something a bit more effective to accommodate these less engaged learners.
Yeah, I mean, we use ours as they're going to be doing all their studying outside the class. They've been using theirs inside the class. Maybe there's a sort of even ground between the two.
So that concludes our presentation today.
Thank you for listening. Please add any questions to the chat.